everything that you've learned about anti-Semitism literally stems from this. An anti-Semitic text purported to describe a Jewish plan to achieve global domination and to document the minutes of a late 19th century meeting attended by world Jewish leaders, the elders of Zion, conspiring to take over the world. It is the Brothers Grimm of anti-Semitism, yes. Like, it is where all, I mean, dude, right there, like, that right there is straight up, and it was, like, mass delivered to any fascist who would listen. This is why I do personally believe that while Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, fell apart and Nazi Germany lost in World War II, fascism absolutely won. Fascism as an ideology, as an ideological tool, was immediately we love taking up the mantle of all of that nonsense. We absolutely have genuinely continued that tradition, both in our domestic affairs, certainly, and absolutely when it comes to our international enforcement. Have you seen what is going on in Germany? I have, you know what? I'm actually going to point to this right now. I wanted to show you something very funny. Nathan Tankis went to the closed screening of The Commandant's Shadow last night, where he had by far the most disturbing experience was the Auschwitz commandant Rudolf Höss's grandson, Kai Höss, and his Christian evangelism for Israel. If you want to understand where we're at, if you want to understand where Germany's vibes are at, there's two videos I want to show you. One is like the liberal rich Germans also chanting the Germany for Germans only. And the other video is this. Here, let's help you get it a little bit. This is the guy. This is the grandson of the dude who was prominently featured in Zone of Interest. Rudolf Höss. Okay, let's see what he had to say about Israel.
Have a moment.
Sure you can, of course.
Or the ramp. Is that better? Yeah, the ramp in the back.
I commend you on taking on your grandfather's legacy, and not legacy, but facing it.
I understand what you're saying.
But I find listening to you very, very concerned. Because it feels to me, as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, that you've replaced a Nazi anti-Semitism with a Christian evangelical anti-Semitism about defined going to.
I think you misunderstood.
I don't think I misunderstood.
Well, you know, I love Israel because I know they're God's people.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that is a form of anti-Semitism. Christian evangelical.
He said, I love Israel because they are God's chosen people. You don't understand it. You don't understand. It was shocking just being in the room with Rudolf Höss's grandson, let alone confronting him. I was my dad's +1, and neither of us realized beforehand. I'm still processing it. There were also many disturbing things about the event, including that it was acquired on October 9th. The panel was very clear. This documentary was explicitly meant to counter discussions of Israel's genocide without actually mentioning Palestinians. The movie literally opens and closes with Rudolf Höss's son and grandson in an Israeli desert, with Kai Höss providing Israel voiceover. Compare what Kai Höss had to say up to what Billy Graham had to say behind closed doors. Kai Höss knows that he should never say synagogue of Satan about Jews like me who reject Israel, but it's fundamentally the same worldview. It's from the Nixon tapes. Nixon explains how Israeli Jews are the best Jews. They both agree that Jews control the media. Billy Graham explains the synagogue of Satan and how Jews had a stranglehold on Germany, but Hitler went about it wrong.
What does this mean? Does it mean that all Jews are bad? No. But it does mean that most Jews are left-wing, particularly the younger ones like that.
I love that they're literally just repeating exactly what the Nazis believed and basically saying, no, you don't understand. Like, all Jews, they go to Israel and that's fine. And they're great. They're great over there. Okay. Not here. Because when they're here, a lot of them like this commie shit. Okay. And I don't like it. They are literally repeating Judeo-Bolshevism as a propaganda point because they legitimately believe it. And they're not technically wrong. Historically speaking, yes, Jews have sided with justice. They have, in many instances, been open socialists and communists. So they're not wrong when they say that. Obviously, they're wrong in a monolithic understanding of it, which they're not even particularly saying. It is wild. Here, listen. They're radical socialists. They're radical commies. added to the mountain of evidence that anti-communism is inherently fascist? Of course. Of course it is. Wow, I wonder why the Jews in Russia were more in favor of the socialists than the czarists in Russia. Exactly. The best Jews are actually the Israeli Jews.
They are the Israeli Jews.
That's right.
Because Israel, and the reason Mrs. Mayer supports me, which she does, and Diane does too, is for a very fundamental reason. It has nothing to do with, they know these Democratic candidates will be catering to the domestic Jewish vote. But she supports me. Because she knows the great danger to Israel is Russia. Now, however, in this country, we must be under no illusion. You're aware of that, aren't you? You're aware of the fact that in the media, we confront almost a solid block of people. They don't, it isn't the atheist, and he's the point of the thing. They're after him because he took the whole thing on. And it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It happens so that insofar as the media is concerned, the power of the media,
they've got it.
They've got it.
He's like, yeah, the Jews control the media. Oh, man. Also, the Nixon Jew count of July 1971 is the name given to then President of the United States, Richard Nixon's attempts to demote and remove Jews from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Right.
And they're the ones putting out the pornographic stuff and putting out everything.
Directly. By the way, this is exactly, when I say this is verbatim what the Nazis believed, okay, with the exception of Israel because it didn't exist back then. This is word for word what the Nazis believed and said, bar for bar. Now, you might be shocked and say, but that's Richard Nixon. That seems quite similar to like cultural Marxism and, you know, George Soros propaganda and many other things that right-wingers repeat on a regular basis nowadays. And you would be right, because it is. It is just saying the exact same while simultaneously changing the narrative a little bit, massaging it a little bit so that it fits modern sensibilities. Just something to consider.
I don't know why they do.
You see, the Bible makes a distinction, Mr. President, between two groups of Jews. One is called the synagogue of Satan.
Yeah. You know it's that our affirms is Jewish.
Yes.
It's nevertheless, the Bible says there are two different kinds.
There are two different kinds. And those people, in the latter days, it's called the remnant of God's people, which will be Jewish people. And then there's the synagogue of Satan. And nearly all of your religious deceptions in the latter days, what the Bible speaks, latter days will be 1,000 years.
This is cool, man. I just want to also point out another thing. There's a reason why we never look at this kind of stuff, because when we live in America, we have a way to understand Christianity and Christian fundamentalism and separate that from like Christianity across the board. There's a reason why these incredibly powerful people are having this conversation in private. And no one will think that like these are mullahs who are operating on fundamentalism, and America is demonstrably like a Christian fundamentalist fascist nation. The reason why we don't view this conversation in the same vein as like an Iranian mullah is because of our monolithic understanding, Islamophobia in general, our monolithic understanding of our enemies or of marginalized communities in general, or, you know, countries that we have dished out a lot of violence to. Whereas in the United States of America, where we live, we of course recognize that this is not representative of every single American, just so you understand. Although, all things considered, if you were to operate on the same boundaries that you, the same smoke that you have for, I guess, Islam, the Islamic world in general, as an Iranian, are you saying that the mullahs are good? You have to literally be the most delusional person on the planet if you are thinking that I'm saying the mullahs are good when comparing them to Richard Nixon. You are basically reinforcing the exact same point that I've made time and time again. A lot of people operate on the boundaries of, well, you know, America's good ultimately. No, when I compare a foreign adversary to America, that is the worst comparison I could make for said foreign adversary. I'm saying that in many instances, it is no different. And in this circumstance, it is no different than the Islamic fundamentalism demonstrated by those in positions of power in the Muslim world. As an Iranian, yes, but also liberalism aesthetics require one to hide the nutty parts of religion. Mullahs don't hide it because they're not liberal. Yes.
What they call the synagogue of Satan. In other words, they are energized by a supernatural power called the devil. This is what the Bible teaches, whether you believe it or don't believe it. This is the biblical teaching, and this is what I believe. And I believe that they have a strange brilliance about them.
What the fuck was that? These Jews, they have a strange brilliance about them.
They have a strange brilliance about them. They're smart, and they are energized, in my judgment, by a supernatural power.
Well, also they do something else, but they're not only smart, but
and you see, of course, Hitler didn't. They had a stranglehold on Germany, on the banking of Germany, on everything in Germany. And the media, they had the whole thing.
That's so funny. Oh, God. They're basically saying that, like, fascist Jews in Israel are the good Jews, and the anti-fascist Jews here in America are satanic Jews that control the media and degenerate Western supremacists, the Western culture and Western civilization. So for the domestic Jews, they have the same exact smoke that Hitler had. It's like if the Havara Agreement actually turned into reality, basically. That's it. That is basically the mentality that they have. If the Havara Agreement worked and Hitler was like, yeah, you know what, instead of like killing all the Jews, we're just gonna ship them forcibly to Israel, then in that situation it's like basically the exact same attitude that these guys have, because they're like, our domestic Jews are degenerate pornographers that are doing unlimited immigration into America in an effort to displace white Americans, white supremacist Americans. So we got to ship them off so they can all become fascist Jews in Israel and then be the good kind of Jew. If you want to know more about Nixon's takes on Jewish people, here it is. The Jews are born spies. Less than a week after the U.S. Supreme Court dealt a blow to the Nixon administration and sanctioned further publication of the Pentagon Papers, President Nixon and a senior White House aide discussed the role of race and religion as drivers of espionage. This conversation stands as one of the cruder examples of Nixon's prejudices and his willingness to air them among confidants.
All the Jews are very close by. And so there's this strange malignancy now seems to creep among them. I don't know, radicalism. I can imagine how the fact that Ellsberg must be terrible like Henry pieces or garment. Just like the Rosenbergs and all that. That just has to kill. Could be a guy by the name of Smith. Very good. Would have been a Rosenstein that changed his name.
It is right. It's always an Ellsberg or
everyone's a Jew. Ellsberg Jew, Rosenberg Jew.
Why is it that you find what he's saying amusing? What do you mean? Like, what am I supposed to do? It's psychotic. It is literally verbatim one-to-one Nazi shit. It is like, I don't know what to say about it. It's basically a further confirmation of everything I say all the fucking time, that Republicans have basically continued that exact same fascist tradition, which, like, I would say even Democrats as well. Like, the American government broadly has continued the same fascist tradition. It's just that the aesthetics are different.
But there are bad disciplines. So that proves.
They're playing Name the Jew. The problem is the they that we're talking about here is the mother president at the time. Hasan really seems to resent the United States. Oh my God, dude. That's your takeaway? What is it that you think you know better than the president of that time? Are you bro, this is literally like being like, well, Adolf Hitler, do you think you know better than he did at the time? The fuck do you mean? I know better than the president of this time too. Please tell me you're trying to bait like literally 12 minutes before the top of the hour. You cannot be defending Richard Nixon in the chat, right? Especially in like one of the surprisingly even more indefensible moments of Richard Nixon. Like this is uniquely bad even for Richard Nixon.
Very interesting thing. So few of those who engage in espionage.
Okay, these guys are baiting, right? There's a lot of like weirdo anti-Semites in here today. What's happening? Like, what's going on? There's like hella people in here that are just like, oh, well, was he wrong though? Yes, dude. Yes, he was. He was wrong. No, I don't think that like Jews are monolithic in their approach, or that they control the media, or that they're all descendants of the synagogue of Satan. Yeah, why did these pigs say that the German Jews had a complete stranglehold over a number of industries, meaning they were the capitalists, and at the same time claimed Judeo-Bolshevism existed? It doesn't have to make sense. Our enemy is both weak and strong at the same time. It just I'll bring it back to a place that you guys understand. You know how a lot of my haters will literally be like, oh, Hasan never donates, right? But I do. So then when I do, they'll turn around and say, oh, he just did it for PR. He did it for clout. It's because the reason why, like the foundational disagreement has nothing to do with my actions. It's just pure resentment. They're just trying to make it stick by any means necessary. And that's how anti-Semitism is as well. In this case, they're both simultaneously saying Jews are defenders of Judeo-Bolshevism, defenders of like socialist, communist, moral degeneracy and rot and yada, 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 while simultaneously saying they also control all the media and also all of the banks. It doesn't have to be true, and it is not. It's just a way to make your resentment stick. Also, the synagogue of Satan sounds bad as I'm not gonna lie, like it does low-key kind of go hard. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they were saying this behind closed doors, but like it sounds incredible. It sounds dope. But that's like, you know, that's besides the point. I know that they didn't imply it in a dope way, but it is kind of cool to be like, yeah, we are descendants of synagogue of Satan. But yeah, ultimately, it doesn't come from like real valid anger and real valid criticisms. It has nothing to do with that at all. It's more so post hoc rationalizations for why you carry this resentment to begin with. You have detailed Jews as the outgroup. So now you will say that they are both capital owners who control all of the different institutions and instruments of capitalism. And you will also simultaneously say they want socialism and they are actually anti-capitalist. Both. Anyway, let's continue.
Very few of them become communists. If they do, they're likely to get an Angela Davis. They're more of the activist type.
As a matter of fact, very few of them become communists. If they do, they're more likely to get into Angela Davis. They're more the activist type, and they throw bombs and this and that. But
and they throw bombs and this and that. But the Negroes, if you ever notice, there's anti-Negro spies. They're not intellectual enough, not smart enough. They're not smart enough.
a little bit of anti-black white supremacist resentment there too. You know, you got to put that in there.
The Jews are born spies. You know, somebody they're just in it, what's up to their necks. Basic deviousness, but also inheritance.
Bro, this is literally just Hitler. Okay, like I'm not even kidding. Like I have to show you some of this fascist propaganda. I need you to here. Okay, here are some stereotypes and canards. Modern economic anti-Semitism is a double helix of intersecting paradigms. The first associating the Jew with paupers and savages, and the second conceiving of Jews as conspirators, leaders of a financial cabal seeking global domination. A World War II era Slovak propaganda poster exhorts readers not to be a servant of the Jew. Foxman describes 6 facets of canards used by proponents of economic anti-Semitism. All Jews are wealthy. Jews are stingy and greedy. Powerful and wealthy Jews control the world. Judaism emphasizes profit and materialism. Jews may cheat non-Jews. Jews use their wealth and power to benefit their own kind. Saying summarizes the myth as Jews control the banks, the money supply, the economy, the businesses of the community, of the country, of the world. He uses illustrations, many slurs, and proverbs in several different languages, suggesting that Jews are stingy, greedy, miserly, or aggressive bargainers. I want to see like, oh, here. One form of economic anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages was a mass of legal restrictions imposed on the occupations and professions of Jews. Local rulers and church officials ruled many professions to the Jews, pushing them into the marginal occupations considered repugnant, such as tax and rent collecting and money lending, but tolerated them as a necessary evil, usury being a sin in both Christianity and Islam. Catholic doctrine then held that money lending for interest was a sin and forbade the Christians. Not being subject to that restriction, Jews dominated this business. The Torah and the later sections of the Hebrew Bible criticize usury, but interpretations of biblical prohibition vary. Since few other occupations were open to them, Jews were motivated to take up money lending. That was said to show Jews were usurers, which then led to many negative stereotypes and propaganda. The natural tension between creditors, typically Jews, and debtors, typically Christians, were added to the social, political, religious, and economic strains. More dangerous was lending to the monarchs of Europe, which enabled them to finance their endless wars and projects. Some monarchs would revenge on repayments, often accusing their Jewish moneylenders of various crimes. The nobility would also borrow large sums to maintain their lavish lifestyles. Peasants who were forced to pay their taxes to Jews could personify them as people taking their earnings and remain loyal to the lords on whose behalf the Jews worked. Also present in the Middle Ages was the insistence by European sovereigns that the Jews belonged to them in a peculiar way, different from that of their other subjects, which was evident in examples of the English legal code, which portrayed the kings as tutor and defender of the Jews and of the Jews as his possessions, writing that for those Jews and all that they possess belonged to the kind as if they were his private property. On the 19th century, Jews came so closely associated with capitalism that some even viewed the Jews as the creator of capitalism. According to Muller, those who embraced capitalism tended to be sympathetic to the Jews, and those who rejected capitalism tended to be hostile to the Jews. Except the irony, of course, is Karl Marx himself, being a Jewish person. Because many Jews were employed in occupations that Marx considered non-productive, he singled out Jews for particular criticism and blamed Judaism for the exploitation and alienation of workers. This is why they say Karl Marx is an anti-Semite, despite being of a Jewish background himself. Moses Mendelssohn argued that the contrary, that commercial activity was just as valid as beneficial as manual labor. Many a merchant, while quietly engaged at his desk, and blah, 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 blah. Marx concluded that Judaism was responsible for the alienation of many Jewish workers. In his 1844 work on the Jewish question, Marx distinguished between the Sabbath Jew and the everyday Jew. Marx argued that, particularly speaking, everyday Judaism was a commercial practice, not a theology. According to Perry, Marx believed that Jews are the embodiment of capitalism, money system in action, and the creators of all its evil consequences on humanity, which is the reason why they say he is a anti-Semite, which once again is ironic because of this part, which is the most important part of this conversation. Jewish Bolshevism is an anti-Semitic and anti-communist canard that is based on the claim that Jews have been the driving force behind or are disproportionately involved in communism, sometimes more specifically Russian Bolshevism. The expression was the title of a pamphlet, The Jewish Bolshevism, and became current after the 1917 October Revolution in Russia, featuring prominently in the propaganda of the anti-Bolshevik white forces during the Russian Civil War. The idea spread worldwide in the 1920s with the publication and the circulation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion that was popularized by Jewish ancestry of many leading Bolsheviks, most notably Leon Trotsky, during and after the October Revolution. Daniel Pipe says that primarily through the Protocols of Elder Zion, the whites spread these charges to an international audience. James Webb wrote that it is rare to find an anti-Semitic source after 1917 that does not stand in the debt to the white Russian analysis of the revolution. The label Judeo-Bolshevism was used in Nazi Germany to equate Jews with communists, implying that communism served Jewish interests and or that all Jews were communists. Remember, they literally simultaneously were claiming Jews control the money supply and the global order and all the banks and all the media, and also simultaneously saying Jews were all communists and were in control of the labor force and were responsible for any kind of revolutionary sentiment, which they did not like. This is precisely the reason why the first people that were placed in concentration camps were not, many of them were Jewish, by the way, were not placed on the virtue of Judaism, of being of Jewish descent, but instead placed there because they were trade unionists, socialists, and communists. So the idea that like Nazi Germany was ever actually socialist, national socialist, was ridiculous from the jump. Winston Churchill himself called communism a Jewish plot and enthusiastically expressed his support for the Nazis during the 1920s and 30s in their struggle against communism. Anyway, Jews and communists were both blamed for having allegedly betrayed Germany during World War I and resulting in Germany signing the Treaty of Versailles in what is known as the stab in the back myth. In Poland, before World War II, Zdokumuna was used in the same way to allege that Jews were conspiring with the Soviet Union to invade Poland. According to Andre Geritz, the myth of Jewish communism was one of the most popular and widespread political prejudices in the first half of the 20th century, in Eastern Europe in particular. The allegation still sees use in anti-Semitic publications and websites today. Also, that allegation is literally a formative one in the modern Republican Party. The world of Pfizer are Jews. The whole of Pfizer are Jews. Genocide vax. Yes, dude. The Jewish doctors and the executives that are engaging in mass inoculation campaigns are actually doing it to genocide everyone. You're right. You got that. You're hitting the double Monty. Where are these chatters coming from, dude? Major General Ulysses S. Grant was influenced by such sentiments during the American Civil War, expelling Jews from areas under his control in Western Tennessee. The Jews as a class violating Every regulation of trade establishment by the Treasury Department and also department orders are hereby expelled within 24 hours from the receipt of his order. That order was quickly rescinded by Abraham Lincoln, but it was already enforced in a number of towns. Now, we looked at a lot of the fascists and their opinion on Judeo-Bolshevism, and we looked at a lot of the American leaders and drew comparisons as to what, like, you know, modern American leaders think about Judaism, stuff like that. Because a lot of people will also nowadays say like communists are anti-Semitic or whatever. So let's hear from one of the godfathers of real existing communist revolution, socialist revolution, a bald man by the name of Lenin. Let's hear what he had to say about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism means spreading enmity towards the Jews. When the accursed Tsarist monarchy was living its last day, it tried to incite ignorant workers and peasants against the Jews. The Tsarist police, in alliance with the landowners and the capitalists, organized pogroms against the Jews. In other countries, too, we often see the capitalists fomenting hatred against the Jews in order to blind the workers, to divert their attention from the real enemy of the working people. Capital. Hatred towards the Jews persists only in those countries where slavery to the landowners and capitalists has created abysmal ignorance among the workers and peasants. Only the most ignorant and downtrodden people can believe the lies and slander that are spread about the Jews. This is a survival of ancient feudal times, when the priests burned heretics at the stake, when the peasants lived in slavery, and when the people were crushed and inarticulate. This ancient feudal ignorance is passing away. The eyes of the people are being opened. It is not the Jews who are the enemies of the working people. The enemies of the workers are the capitalists of all countries. Among the Jews, there are working people, and they form the majority. They are our brothers, who, like us, are oppressed by capital. They are our comrades in the struggle for socialism. Among the Jews, there are kulaks, exploiters and capitalists, just like there are among the Russians and among people of all nations. The capitalists strive to sow and foment hatred between workers of different faiths, different nations, and different races. Those who do not work are kept in power by the power and strength of capital. Rich Jews, like rich Russians, and the rich in all countries are in alliance to oppress, crush, and rob and disunite the workers. Shame on accursed Tsarism, which tortured and persecuted the Jews. Shame on those who foment hatred towards the Jews, who foment hatred towards other nations. Long live the fraternal trust and fighting alliance of the workers of all nations in the struggle to overthrow capital. Literally anyone who compares Bolshevik anti-Semitism, which did exist and was largely inherited from the Russian Empire, is a fool. The USSR anti-Semitism was nothing compared to Tsarist and the massive pogroms that brutally massacred Jewish population throughout the Russian Empire, and even many white emigre supported the Nazis against the USSR. Yeah, the Tsarist anti-Semitism is, like, I would say, foundational in, I mean, dude, they wrote the protocols, dude. That's it. Like, this literally is the most significant anti-Semitic text. Everything that you think about in terms of, like, everything that you've learned about anti-Semitism literally stems from this. An anti-Semitic text purported to describe a Jewish plan to achieve global domination and to document the minutes of a late 19th century meeting attended by world Jewish leaders, the elders of Zion, conspiring to take over the world. The fraudulent protocols included plans to subvert the morals of the non-Jewish world, to control the world's economies by Jewish bankers, to have press and Jewish control of the press, and ultimately destroy civilization. The document of 24 protocols was analyzed by Stephen Jacobs and Mark Weitzman, who documented several protocols that suggested that Jews would employ control over the world's banking system to dominate the world. It is the Brothers Grimm of anti-Semitism, yes. Like, it is where all, I mean, dude, right there, like, that right there is straight up, and it was, like, mass delivered to any fascist who would listen. Yeah, that Lenin speech at the same time in the U.S., Henry Ford's paper, here it is, was running excerpts from the protocols of the elders of Zion. Hasan, why do you know so much about anti-Semitism? Because I am an anti-fascist. Because I am an anti-capitalist. And capitalists and fascists, which are two peas in a pod, are actually, in historically and in contemporary society, very anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is seen as a canary in the coal mine for that reason. Anti-Semitism, and not like in the ADL, Apartheid Defense League's definitional definition of anti-Semitism, but like actual anti-Semitism, the notion that like Jews are monolithic in their understanding of the world and control the money supply and the media and use it to degenerate Western civilization, that kind of anti-Semitism oftentimes is a clear-cut indication that someone is most likely operating on fascist principles. This is also part of the reason why extra mad about all of the bastardization of this like very serious charge, a charge of anti-Semitism done by, in some instances, Jewish people that are cynically weaponizing it, like with StopAntisemitism.org or ADL and many other defenders of Israel. It's ridiculous. It's fucked up. It dilutes real anti-Semitism while also creating an environment that is perfect for fascists to exploit. Anyway, we're done with the Nixon stuff. I deviated here. I got here specifically because we were having a conversation about Germans and how in modern Germany, for numerous reasons, and I've talked about this before a million times over at this point, for a lot of self-serving reasons, modern Germans are unconditional dick riders of the state of Israel. Some of the reasons for that are, of course, the collective guilt of the Holocaust. But I think that the real reason, the real nefarious reason, is that there's a lot of Islamophobia in Germany, and a lot of people spiritually, holistically, I think, in Germany, see Israel and a defense of Israel and the collective antiquated, ancient, epigenetic anti-Semitism of the Arabs that they believe and repeatedly reinforce as a way to kind of move the attention away from the unimaginable wrongs that the German state dished out against Jews during the Holocaust. It's a way to really sidestep the Holocaust, to be like, no, you know who's the real anti-Semites actually? The Arabs, the Muslims. I think that's what it is. That's a major reason for why they are such unconditional dick riders for Israel. It's great. It's great for them. Because now they're like, you know who the real anti-Semites are now? Arabs, Muslims, you know? Yeah, it's not just in Germany. This is an attitude across Europe, 100%. And this is not an attitude across Europe for like all working class individuals in Europe. It's just like the elites in Europe have this kind of attitude. Academics, those in positions of power, capitalists across the board, oftentimes love transferring the guilt of like collective anti-Semitism in the form of pogroms from every single European country, and Russia as well, Tsarist Russia, and transferring that collective anti-Semitic actions and all of the guilt that they feel about their historical anti-Semitism, transfer that over to the Arabs and the Muslims in general. Does this game get scary? Yes, it does. When you think about all the scary things that come into the country. Oh, look at this beauty. Cockdilla, cock the bezel of wood. About the fucking vehicle. What is this, huh? What the fuck is this, Gamal? Seems like we have a real weapons dealer in our hands, huh? You know, this is not America. What were you planning on doing with this, huh? Revolution? Wait, they have chickens in the back. What the fuck? Tonight, you cannot have cock in the car. You are journalist from Kazakhstan. You are not coming in, you fucking bastard. Absolutely not. No CIA!
Anyone else finds it suspicious that Hasan speaks fluent Russian?
You guys are so stupid.